In today's video, we're going to be going through a new tutorial series for UEFN. Now, if you struggle at verse programming, this series will take you from the absolute basics of coding to the most advanced UEFN verse programmer you ever know. You will be able to create your own custom devices for any custom map that you have. If you have any ideas, do not worry, this verse programming will make those ideas come to life. So, first thing that we need to do is open up UEFN. Make sure that you have it downloaded. I'll put a download link in the description. And once you have downloaded the UEFN, we're going to go into the island templates here. So we go into island templates, and then the template we're using is just a blank one. Now the only thing you need to change here is the project name. Name it whatever you want. For now, I'm going to name this tutorials. And for your team selection, if you do have a team or you create a team, you just click this and then choose that team. But for the sake of this tutorial, I will have no team. And so once you've done that, just click create. And once that's been created, this is what yours will look like. All you want to do is with the content drawer, if you click that, and then click dock in layout, it will dock in the layout like so. Me personally, I like to have my Verse Explorer next to it, so I'm going to drag that tab over here and then just make this one a little smaller because we don't need the details panel that big. Once you have your window set up and this is how you like it, get familiar with the UEFN layout and whatnot before you try any verse. Once you've done that, you want to head over to the Verse Explorer. Now this is how you create a verse file. So on the Verse Explorer, right click tutorials, or yours will have your project name, add new verse file to project, and then we want the verse device at the top, and we're gonna just name this lesson 1. You can name it whatever you want, but you want it something like this, and then click on create. Now what this will do is it will create this right here, and to have this active in game, so we're able to like do settings on it and actually have a device, what you want to do is go to content browser, click Control Shift and B, and then when you click on the tutorials content, yours will say whatever your name is, content. We'll have a lesson 1 device right here. Drag that into the world like so, just click and drag, and now we have our device in the game. But to actually open the file, we want to go back to Verse Explorer and double click on lesson1.verse. This will open Visual Studio Code if you have it downloaded. If not, it should prompt you. So this is your verse device, and this is where your code will go. Don't worry about any of this for now. I'll just show you what it does. So there's print hello world and print 2 + 2 = 2 + 2. If we go back into the Unreal editor, and the way for us to see whether our code works, first let's save this. For us to see whether the code works, we're going to simply launch a session right here. Now this will launch your Fortnite and put you into the session so you can test your level. And once it's successfully loaded, it will display this, and if you open up your Fortnite, it will look something like this. Now for the code to actually run, we're going to go ahead and click start game, and you can see at the top left there, it's very small and it goes briefly, but don't worry. If we hit the map, whatever your keybind is for map, and then we go to the log section, it will see here, ignore all of this beforehand, this is just what Fortnite does in the background, but here on these last two is what we're wanting to see. So you see it printed hello world 2 + 2 = 4, and if we go back onto our verse code, as you can see here, we have the print hello world and the print 2 + 2, but as you know, it did 2 + 2 = 4. It didn't say curly brackets 2 + 2 curly brackets. If we didn't have these curly brackets and it was just left like so, it would have printed this string here, and string is a type. When we add these curly brackets back, it does the math of this because it's not a string, so it does 2 + 2. These are integers, and that's another type. So I'm going to go ahead and create something called a variable. Variables are used to store data. Not as complicated as it sounds, but to create one, you do var, which variable, and then you do your variable name. This can be named anything. You don't have to name it exactly what I'm putting. So if I put number, and then you do a semicolon like this, and then this is the type of variable. So number, we're going to do an int, which is an integer. That's a type. And then equals, and we want it to equal 10. So now we have a variable called number, which is a type of integer, and it's equal to the integer 10. Let's go ahead and create another one. Let's call it string of type string. And then for a string type, you need to put whatever you want inside of the quotation marks. So we'll put tutorial inside of the quotation marks. This is a string, and the reason we use variables is so that later in our code we can access the value. Now the value is just simply what it equals. So the value of this is the integer 10, and the value of this is the string tutorial. So I'll show you what I mean. If I do another print function right here, and I print string number, right, you would think, okay, so this will print the string and then the number with a space in between, so it'll print tutorial 10, right? Wrong. And the reason it won't actually print that is because we haven't used the curly brackets. This will just simply print the string number. So to do that, we're just going to add these curly brackets in between each of our variable names. And just a reminder that this number and string doesn't have to be number and string. You can name it whatever you want. This is whatever you put. I can name it that and it'll be fine. You tend to want to name it something that relates to what it is. So this is a number, so I called it number. This is a string, so I called it string. And variables have to start in verse programming with a capital letter. So we go back to UEFN, and if I go to verse, build verse code, or you can do Control-Shift-B, and then as you see, this button will pop up saying push verse changes. You can push changes, but this takes like 10 times longer. So if you've just made a change in verse, you can click push verse changes, and that will pretty much instantly load. We go back to the game and we click start game. Now let's see what our code does. So you can see there on the left side it says tutorial 10. So there we go, tutorial 10. This is our string and this is our number. And there are plenty of different types that we'll get into a later date. Anytime something comes after the semicolon when we're labeling variables, like if I did a float of type float, this is simply a number but with a decimal point. Now another cool thing you can do is you can have constants. So first let's make a constant and then I'll show you the difference between a variable and a constant. So if I create a constant called number2, we can't call it number because there's already a variable called number, so we call it number2, and this is going to be another integer, and this one's going to be 20. But as you noticed, we haven't put var in front of it, and that's because this is a constant and this is a variable. The difference being, now if I make a new line with a variable, you can change the value. So if I do set number, which is our variable, equal to, and let's set it to 25. Now if I do print with the curly brackets and I print number, I save that file, push verse changes. As you can see, we're printing the same variable, but it has two different values. One is 10 and one is 25. And that's what you can do with variables. You can change the value. Now with constants, we can't change the value. So if I did number2 equals 500, it would give us an error. The assignment's left-hand expression type int cannot be assigned to. That's because it's a constant. And you will use both of these a lot in coding. And the next constant we can have is an editable. So if I do @editable, just like this, and then I did number3 of type int equals 200. Don't need this massive space in between, by the way. I just like to do this as personal preference for my editables, but you can have it just like this with just a single space. So if I save this file, go back to my UEFN and do Control-Shift-B, which is build verse code. Now if I click on our device, you'll see at the bottom here we have a number3 and a value. Now the editable actually lets us assign this in the device itself. So I can change this to be 500. On our code, it says that it's 200. If I go ahead and print number3, just to make it easier, I'm going to add a string that says our variable name, just so we know which one's which. And because I've edited something inside of the editor itself, now I need to push changes. And once all those changes are pushed, let's start our game. In the log, we have number 25 and our number3, which was 200 in Visual Studio Code, but in the editor, I actually changed it on the device to be 500. And all three types of these comes in very handy in coding. Now, just to recap what we have learned so far. I know I threw at you a lot of keywords, but don't worry too much about that. All you need to know is that a variable you can change and it stores data. Constant, you can't change later on in the code, and it also stores data. And editable, you can edit in the editor on the device. And one last thing I'll show you before we end off this lesson is we'll do another print function, and we're going to print number2 plus number. This is going to do is get our integer 20 plus 10. We look inside of our log, it printed 45. Now some of you might have thought, oh, it's going to print 30 because number2 and number is 20 add 10. But if you remember, we set number to be 25. So actually it's 20 plus 25, which gave us 45. But I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson and learned something. The next one will be dropping soon. Make sure to go follow that lesson. And if this helped you out, then leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, comment it down below.